She's like a sickness in my brain, a vision standing by the window pane. She ripples through the blinds and leaves me in a daze. It's in the way her body moves me, the way she grabs me and intoxicates, until the signals in my mind forget to operate. In a fragile skull, I take my pleasure from my alcohol. She'll never give you any time at all. She just comes and goes, you know. And she's got me living in a chemical love, and I try to find the strength to know when she comes back to me again. I'm gonna come up from my hiding.
Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel and thank you for joining me for another coffee and crime time. And the case we're talking about today is recently developing out of Hong Kong, and it concerns the murder of Abby Choi, a 28-year-old socialite and model who vanished on February 21st. And when officials were able to finally piece together the puzzle of what had happened to her, the picture was gruesome and terrifying, especially when it was discovered who was responsible for her inevitable death. And when I say finally, I'm not going to act like the authorities in Hong Kong didn't move very quickly, because they absolutely did. She was reported missing on the 21st, and they pretty much had solved the case by the 25th. I'm very actually impressed with how quickly they moved. But we have a lot to talk about today, so let's have a quick word from our sponsor so that we can dive right into the case. And today's sponsor is Harlowe. Fresh. Who doesn't want to make mealtime easier? Or who doesn't want to prepare restaurant quality meals for themselves or their families, meals made with fresh, wholesome ingredients that you can put together quickly and from the comfort of your own home, right? Who doesn't want to do that? I want to do that. You want to do that. And HelloFresh makes cooking at home fun, easy, and affordable, delivering fresh, pre-measured ingredients for mouth-watering seasonal recipes right to your door, which means less time in the grocery store, and it also means cutting out stressful meal planning. With the cost of groceries going up every day, now is the perfect time to get started with HelloFresh, because using HelloFresh is 70% less expensive than going out to eat at a restaurant. And one of my favorite parts about HelloFresh is that they give me exactly what I need for each recipe, and only what I need, right? The seasonal ingredients are picked at peak ripeness for quality and taste, and they get from the farm to my door in less than 7 days. And like I said, you get exactly the right amount for the recipe you're making, which means less food waste and less of your money going in the garbage. And each recipe comes with a handy and easy to follow recipe card with step-by-step instructions and pictures, right? Step-by-step instructions and pictures, and that means it's pretty much impossible to mess up, even if you don't think you're a good cook. You would be surprised what you can whip up with HelloFresh. I personally love that HelloFresh has 40 weekly recipes to choose from, so it gives variety, and they have meals for all meal occasions, lifestyles, and preferences, whether you're vegetarian or you need extra protein. And some of my recent favorites have been the soy glazed salmon, which was amazing, and the mushroom and chive risotto. I am a sucker for a good risotto, and this was a good risotto. But I will say, last night we made cheddar stuffed meatloaves with potato wedges, carrots, crispy shallots or shallot, if you're Gordon Ramsay, and a special sauce. That's all it says, special sauce. The special sauce was delicious. And although those meatloaves did not look pretty when they came out, when they were finished, okay, they were delicious. And everyone loved them, and that's all that matters. And I will say now that I have been working out more, I've been doing more weight training, and I've really been struggling to get my protein in because I don't eat a lot throughout the day. But powering up with protein is easier than ever with HelloFresh. They actually have a Protein Smart tag on their menu, so you can quickly and easily find meals that have 30 grams of protein or more, like their creamy Dijon dill chicken or their one-pot pork and black bean chili. And that's really helped me out as far as meal planning goes, because I'll just take a whole HelloFresh meal that's meant for 4 people and I'll prepare it all for myself and then portion it out so that I have 4 meals to grab from, throughout the week, and then make sure my muscles have enough food. There's just so much to love about HelloFresh. I could go on for another 10 minutes, but now is the time for you to give it a try, for you to see for yourself. Right now, if you go to HelloFresh.com and use code stephanieharlowe60, you can get 60% off plus free shipping. And this is such a great deal, 60% off. I'm actually going to take advantage of it myself. Once again, click the link in the description box or go to HelloFresh.com and use code stephanieharlowe60 to get 60% off plus free shipping. Thank you so much to HelloFresh for sponsoring today's video, and let's dive in. So I've been doing this true crime thing on YouTube for several years now. I mean, I don't even know exactly how long. I want to say like 4 years, probably maybe 3.5 full time. But that means I've encountered a lot of cases, right? I have talked about a lot of victims. We've talked about a lot of terrible things. And there's something that I've sort of discovered as I go through these. There's always an extra level of discomfort when the victim in a case that we're talking about had an active social media presence, because it's like the snapshot in time. It's eerie. It's very eerie because you can scroll back through and see them living their lives, depending on how active they are, maybe almost every day. You can see them posting every day. You know what they're doing every day. You see them interacting with their friends and their loved ones. You see them pursuing their passions or following their dreams. And then all of a sudden, all of their activity just stops. They cease to exist on social media. And when somebody who's that active on social media cease to exist on social media, and then you find out what happened to them in real life, that they're no longer with us, it's very unsettling. Abby Choi had a big social media following. And if you scroll through Abby's Instagram, you can see her living her best life, you know? She's carrying Hermes bags, she's wearing couture, she's posing for pictures next to fashion designers, getting her makeup done, partying with Gucci and Prada, and she's traveling, right? She's sipping champagne on a boat with friends in a tropical climate 1 week. She's in front of the Eiffel Tower the week after. A few weeks before that, she's perched cozily in front of a mountain landscape. You know, she was all over the place. She was living a dream life, the life of, an influencer, of a fashion icon. On February 15th, 2023, in her last Instagram post, Abby shared a picture of the cover of a French magazine, and it was her on the cover. And she wrote in the caption, quote, "From Hong Kong to the cover of L'Officiel, Monaco, my journey as a style icon continues. Grateful for this recognition and the continued support along the way," end quote. Now, the magazine article tells us that Abby Choi has taken the world by storm with her impeccable sense of style and her unbridled passion for fashion. They said that Abby has carved out a name for herself as one of the most sought-after influencers in the industry, and because of her keen eye for style and her ability to mix and match pieces in unexpected ways, she's become a true trendsetter, with fans all over the world following her every move. And just from looking at her, you can see that Abby Choi was very fashionable, always very put together, graceful, timeless even, which makes it hard to really comprehend and wrap your head around the fact that this was her last Instagram post ever. Because although Abby was a timeless beauty, she was running out of time at the point when she posted that, and she had no idea. She had no idea that when she was posting that, when she was out there living her best life and working and carving a name for herself out in this world, there was already a plot being set in motion to end her life. Now, at the time of recording this, 7 people have already been arrested in connection with Abby's murder. And there is a question as to whether that number will continue to rise, because at first it was just 4 people, and then it was 5, and then it was 6, and then it was 7. And more people just kept getting arrested. So I wonder what else they're going to uncover as we go further in this. But let's be honest, you can't know everything about a person from their Instagram profile. Even though Abby had a big Instagram presence, you wouldn't know that Abby was the oldest of 4 daughters and that she had come from a wealthy Hong Kong family, a family who ran a construction business and who had dealings with mainland China. You wouldn't know that in 2012, Abby had gotten married when she was just 18 to a man named Alex Kwong, who was also 18 at the time. And together they had 2 children, a son and a daughter, who were 10 and 8 at the time of their mother's murder. You also wouldn't know that Abby and Alex divorced around 2015, and Abby entered another relationship in 2016 with a man named Chris Tan, whose father founded a successful chain of noodle shops in Hong Kong and China. Abby and Chris would also have 2 children together, a boy and a girl, who were just 6 and 3 when their mother was killed. Chris Tam has said that knowing Abby and getting to be close to her was a privilege because she was so kind and giving. And I mean, we can see this because even Abby's ex-husband and his family were the benefactors of her generosity. And in the end, it seemed like that was her downfall. Before we dive into the suspects, the people who have been charged with this crime, let me explain a little bit about Hong Kong, the city where this crime happened. Hong Kong actually has an incredibly low crime rate, and it's been rated one of the safest cities in the world, even though there's over 7 million people living there. Most people know Hong Kong as a bustling city, a glittering financial hub, a business center, and a tourist destination. And a lot of people actually think there's no difference between Hong Kong and China. But Hong Kong is actually a former British colony that was turned back over to China in 1997, but at this point, it's currently considered to be a special administration region of the People's Republic of China, known here on out in this video as the PRC. Now, we all know that China is a communist country. I hope at least we have, that level of understanding of what China is. But Hong Kong, kind of on the other end of that spectrum, is a very money-driven place, very capitalistic. And the reason for this dichotomy between Hong Kong and China is that under the doctrine of one country, two systems, China promised Hong Kong 50 years of self-governance and freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of assembly, basic human rights that the population of mainland communist China do not have. Like, they can't talk badly about their government in the paper, in the press. They can't protest the government, things like that. That's just not, they can try, right? But it's not going to happen. They're not going to get away with that for very long in China, in the PRC. So Hong Kong has actually been allowed to continue its free enterprise system. They've got their own currency, the Hong Kong dollar. They have their own passports and immigration channels, and legal system. And for a while, China didn't interfere. And as a result, Hong Kong really flourished after they were turned back over to China. And they were flourishing before, and that's why they wanted to kind of keep what they had going, because they were like, we got a good thing going here, and we don't want to go with China and then just all of a sudden be wiped out and have to be communist because they're communists. So their economy flourished, and their economy is characterized by low taxes, free trade, and limited government interference. All the best things. Now, for some context, China has the second largest economy in the world, valued at 17.3 trillion. But they also have a population of 1.4 billion people and a lot more land than Hong Kong, which, has a population of 7.4 million people living on 427 square miles. And although Hong Kong isn't pulling in the economy numbers of China, for their size, they do pretty well economy-wise, ranking 39th in the world with a GDP of $368 billion. For a long time, the Hong Kong economy was rated the freest in the world. In fact, the Heritage Foundation awarded them this honor from 1995 to 2019, but Hong Kong was removed from that list in 2021 due to the belief that the economy was being more directly influenced by the PRC at that point, and it is true. Without a doubt, China seems to be running out of patience with this previous colony because in the past 10 years, Beijing has been exerting more influence and control, most likely triggered by pro-democracy protests in 2014 and 2019. China doesn't like protests against the government. They don't like democracy either. So, for instance, it's now mandatory that lessons on patriotism and national security be taught in Hong Kong schools, and some educational textbooks even deny that Hong Kong was ever a British colony. And you always have to be worried about that when a country focuses so hard on nationalism and also tries to rewrite history to make it seem like certain things didn't happen. Freedom of speech and freedom of the press have also been suppressed in Hong Kong, and pro-democracy newspapers that had openly spoken out against the government have been shut down, with some of their publishers being jailed. And, typically once you go to jail in communist China, no one sees you again, It's not good. So the PRC has also put a stop to annual protests marking Tiananmen Square. And starting in 2020, authorities launched a crackdown on political dissent and protests, arresting dozens of activists and imprisoning them for unauthorized assembly, citing the pandemic as the reason when, that wasn't the reason. in my opinion, and many others. Obviously, this was a very condensed summary of the incredibly long and complicated history and dynamics of China and Hong Kong. And it's not really relevant to this case, but it does give you an idea of the setting at least, and an understanding of what the people of Hong Kong are fighting for, even at this moment, that they just want to remain free and be left alone. I don't like talking about places that are struggling with things without giving a nod to those things that they're struggling with and fighting for. And, that's why I'm doing this. However, later we are going to have another little history lesson about Hong Kong, but this one is relevant to the case. So remember a little earlier I said that at this point, 7 people have been arrested in connection with Abby's murder, and I'm going to tell you right now who 4 of those people are. You've got 28-year-old Alex Kwong, who's Abby's ex-husband, her first husband, the father of 2 of her children. You also have 31-year-old Anthony Kwong. Now, Anthony is Alex's brother and also Abby's friend. Seems like they were actually very close, and Abby had actually employed Anthony as her personal driver. You also have Alex and Anthony's mother, 63-year-old Jenny Lee, and Alex's father, 65-year-old Kwang Kao. So, what happened? What happened here? What are these 4 people being charged with? What did they do? Let's start from the beginning. After the divorce from Alex, Abby appeared to be doing, very well financially. And so she continued to provide for her ex-husband, who was unemployed, as well as his parents. She basically, it looks like she financially supported them, and she even purchased them a 4-bedroom, 1,800 square foot luxury apartment in Hong Kong's exclusive Kadoorie Hill neighborhood in July of 2019 for nearly 73 million Hong Kong dollars. Okay? How much is that in U.S.? I don't know. Let me check. But, it's still a lot. It can't be that drastically different in the U.S. Okay, so 73 million Hong Kong dollars is worth $9,299,431 U.S. So still a lot, almost $10 million. And the thing that lets me know that Abby was doing financially well is because she purchased this home, this apartment in July of 2019. And by October of that same year, she'd paid the mortgage off. So listen, Abby clearly had some money, and she used it to provide a very nice home for the 2 children that she shared with Alex, as well as his mother and his father. And Abby even helped Alex's brother, Anthony, buy a new home. And like I said, it seemed as if Abby and Anthony, her ex-brother-in-law, they were very close, even after the divorce. I couldn't find any pictures of Abby and her ex-husband Alex together, but there's tons of pictures of Abby and Anthony together. Remember that Anthony worked as Abby's personal driver, so she helped him get a house, she employed him. It seems they were going to parties together. On Abby's birthday, Anthony posted pictures of them together, wished her a happy birthday. In his post, he was always calling her sis, even after the divorce. And it was even reported that Anthony and his wife had gone on a trip with Abby and her new partner, Chris Tam, last year. So as long as Abby was providing her in-laws with a place to live and a lavish lifestyle, there appeared to be no issues. Everybody was good with everyone. But in 2022, Abby made plans to sell the apartment in Kadoorie Hill, and this did not sit well with her ex-husband's family, especially with her ex-father-in-law, Kwang Kao. And there's something interesting you should know about a few members of this family, specifically Alex, Abby's ex-husband, and Alex's father, Kwang Kao. So Alex, who's only 28 at this point, he seemed to be something of a natural-born con man. And Hong Kong officials say that he's been wanted since 2015 for his alleged role in a $5 million gold scam. Now, apparently, Alex was meeting young men online and convincing them to make fake investments. Well, the men who were making the investments, they didn't know they were fake, which I guess is the problem. But I also, read that there's huge issues with, online scams in Hong Kong. They have a very low violent crime rate, but their crime rate for scams and, hoaxes and basically things like this where you're just manipulating and tricking people out of their money, Hong Kong's got a big issue with that. Alex would also later appear in court for jumping bail on jewelry theft charges. He racked up between May of 2013 and January of 2015. Now, he ended up pleading not guilty to 7 counts of jewelry theft, but he skipped out on his court date. He skipped out on his trial. And this is something that he should have known not to do, right? He should have a better understanding of the legal system and of the law, because Alex's own father had been an illustrious Hong Kong police officer for years, right? Kwang Khao was a Hong Kong police officer, and he retired in 2005, which is odd timing considering that he had just received a promotion that same year, and 4 years before that, he'd received a medal for his long service. But there were rumors that Kwang Khao had been forced to resign after allegations of sexual abuse. And according to Abby's best friend, Kwang Khao had told his ex-daughter-in-law that if she sold the apartment out from under them and didn't make other living arrangements for them, he was going to kill her. Now, I do wonder if this apartment that Abby bought was a way maybe for her to hide money for the purposes of tax evasion, because she bought it in 2019. She had it paid off that same year. And then just a few years later in 2022, she wanted to sell it. Now, I don't know exactly how it works, but I do know that rich people use real estate to keep their money like out of the hands of the government, even if they don't plan to do anything with this house or apartment or property that they bought. It's just kind of a way to like have your money in a place where it can't be taxed. And if Abby was able to pay off a $73 million Hong Kong dollar mortgage, she was rich, and she came from a wealthy family who was in construction. So I'm sure she was getting financial and real estate advice from them. But even though Abby had paid for the apartment was actually registered in the name of her father-in-law, Kwang Khao. And when Abby promised that she would find another place for them to live, Kwang Khao still resisted. So Abby consulted a lawyer who told her that as long as she could prove she'd paid for the apartment, she could sell it and legally collect the profits. Now, I suppose that Alex Kwang and his family had become so dependent on Abby and honestly so entitled that at this point they felt they had no other choice than to murder her. Now, I'm sure there's more to this, right? There's a lot more to this story that we're not hearing because it is Hong Kong, so technically it is China, and they're not known for like giving tons of details and telling you the full story all the time. But what could have happened? Because why would Alex's family kill Abby if she was like their meal ticket? She was providing for them. Well, did she have a life insurance policy that Alex or his kids, could collect on? Had she left money to them in her will that they knew about? Or was she so annoyed by the fuss they were making over the apartment that she said, okay, I'm actually going to sell this apartment. I'm not going to find you another place to live. I'm going to take all the money and you guys are on your own from now on because you don't make my life easier. Why should I make your life easier? So we don't really know what happened, but it definitely had something to do with money. Hong Kong officials claim that in early February 2023, Alex, his brother Anthony, and their parents rented a ground floor flat in Hung May Too Soon, a popular and scenic coastal village in Plover Cove, which is, in Hong Kong, but it was a popular weekend getaway destination for people who lived in the city, like kind of living on top of each other. That's the majority of the population in Hong Kong. So neighbors in Hung May Too Soon reported seeing a man in his 60s going in and out of that flat in early and mid-February. He was driving a 7-seater van. He always looked unfriendly, and he seemed paranoid. He would arrive and kind of check around and look all around him to make sure no one was there, or to just check out the scene before entering the flat. And sometimes he was accompanied by a woman in her 60s with curly hair, and it's obviously believed that these two people were Abby's former in-laws. And it just so happens that this 7-seater van they were seen driving also belonged to Abby, but this van was usually in the possession of Anthony Kwang, her ex-brother-in-law, because he was employed as her personal driver. So he would have it, and when he needed to pick her up, he would go get her. So what was Kwang Khao doing at this flat so many times in February of 2023? Well, as it turns out, he was constructing a kill room like in Dexter. He covered the walls and floors with plastic, and he equipped the flat with tools that would be used to dismember the body of 28-year-old Abby Choi. According to Hong Kong officials, quote, the flat was arranged meticulously by cold-blooded killers. Tools that are used to dismember human bodies were found in the flat, including meat grinders, chainsaws, long raincoats, gloves, and masks. The suspects covered the walls and the flat with a sail, and they put on face shields and raincoats so they would not get blood-stained by dismembering the body, end quote. It seems super organized, right? It seems like somebody who knew what they were doing arranged this, and then we remember Kwang Kao, Alex's father and Abby's ex-father-in-law, was a Hong Kong police officer. So he might have some, inside information on how to keep a crime scene clean. So this is what officials believe happened. On February 21st, 2023, Anthony Kwang drove to the Kadori Hill flat in a 7-seater van to pick up Abby. He was supposed to drive her to get one of her children and then drive her to her new home with her current partner. When she slipped into the perceived safety of her van, Abby was wearing a white t-shirt, white slacks, and white slippers. But for that pop of color that those in the fashion world know is a necessity, Abby was carrying a purple handbag. According to The Independent, Anthony drove Abby away, and as they approached the entrance to the Lion Rock Tunnel, which connects to the Plover Cove area, Anthony stopped, pulled over, and Alex Kwang got into the vehicle. Now, obviously, we don't know what happened after that, but when Abby did not arrive home, her partner, Chris Tam, reported her missing. And during the investigation, police spoke to the Kwang family, and they received false and misleading information from all of them, creating what Hong Kong officials called a smokescreen to mislead police, and to basically have the police running in circles, checking surveillance video, and following up on nonsense leads and alibis that had them running in circles. But as soon as law enforcement realized that they'd been lied to, that they'd been running in circles, they focused more closely on Alex and his family, and this led them to the Hung May Too Soon flat on February 24th. Now, according to the Morning Post, the flat had no furniture in it, no beds in the bedrooms. Instead, it had basically been converted into a human butcher shop. That was its sole purpose at that point. And amongst the meat grinder, the black raincoats, the electric saw, the hammers, police found Abby's purple handbag. There was a smallish apartment-sized refrigerator located in the flat, and inside of that, police found 2 dismembered human legs that DNA testing would later confirm belonged to Abby Choi. There were also 2 soup pots inside the refrigerator, full of, all the stuff you'd want to see in a delicious and hearty soup: carrots, onions, green radishes, minced meat. But police immediately suspected that the meat was of the human variety. And the soup pots, they had a bunch of liquid inside, and the liquid was topped with a thick layer of fat. Now, the contents of the soup pots were later analyzed at a police facility, and inside they found several ribs and a skull. And the skull was found to have a large hole on the right rear of it. And the police believe that after Alex got into the van with Abby and Anthony, Abby was hit on the head from behind, rendering her unconscious so that they could transport her to the kill room that they and their father had, set up and ready. Now, the van has been taken into police custody to be searched for forensic evidence, but as of now, that is the theory, and this may have been the blow that killed Abby as well. At least I hope she was dead by the time they started cutting her up and chopping her up, because if there's a hole in her skull, hopefully the blow was hard enough to end her at that point and not, have her brought there just unconscious. Because then at that time, what are they going to do? Are they just going to start cutting into her when she's still alive? What was the plan here? Now, after these gruesome discoveries, Kwang Kao, his wife Jenny Lee, and their son, Anthony Kwang, were obviously arrested. But it appeared that Alex, the little bitch he is, had fled, and he was in hiding. And because Alex is the little entitled bitch that he is, who can't make a buck without scamming people or killing the mother of his children, and because he was so entitled to live this high roller life, even though he didn't have a job, he wasn't hard to find, right? Because he'd been hiding out in a luxury apartment that had been rented by a 47-year-old masseuse who had also been in a relationship with Alex's father, Kwang Kao, for roughly about 6 months. This woman, who's referred to only as Miss Wu in the documents, she, I guess, had been coming into work as her job as a masseuse less and less recently, and she told coworkers that she'd found herself a rich old man who wanted to take care of her with his daughter-in-law's money. I added that in for context, but that's what it would be, right? It wouldn't be, Kwang Kao didn't have his own money. Whatever he had, he got from Abby. So Miss Wu was arrested because she helped her sugar daddy rent not only the apartment that Alex was hiding out in, but also she helped him rent the flat that was used for the murder of Abby. On February 25th, law enforcement in Hong Kong intercepted Alex at the Tung Chung Development Pier after they'd received information that he was planning to escape the city via speedboat. When he was arrested, Alex had $500,000 in cash on his person, as well as several expensive watches valued at roughly $4 million. And at that time, police also arrested a 41-year-old man named Lam or Lim. It's different depending on what source you read. But they arrested him on the suspicion of basically helping Alex escape Hong Kong in exchange for $100,000. Now, local papers in Hong Kong report that this man was a friend of Alex's and that he had worked for a yacht charter company. So he became the sixth person to be arrested in connection with Abby's murder. And I mean, China does not mess around with crime. I will say that. It doesn't matter if you committed the crime yourself or helped or facilitated in some way. You'll be seen as just as guilty as the people who committed the actual crime. And they don't care what excuses or justifications you have. They don't care. Hong Kong is notoriously tough on crime, which is it's believed why it's like one of the reasons they have such a low violent crime rate. Hong Kong be like, oh, you talked to Alex Kwang once and he mentioned needing a loan and you gave him money and that was the money he was found with? Electric chair for you. Like, they don't care. If you took any part in any crime and you were even on the periphery, like, you're going to get hauled in. But anyways, on that same afternoon, over 100 police officers descended on a cliff-top graveyard east of the city center. And I guess that they went there because this was an area that Kwang Kao and Anthony Kwang were suspected to have visited on February 22nd. And, you know, as we know, some body parts of Abby's had been discovered at that flat. In the soup pots and in the refrigerator, but other parts of her body were missing still, such as her torso and her hands. So police were searching this area to hopefully find those other body parts. And they searched with police dogs. They even brought in divers. But as of now, when I'm recording this, they haven't located all of Abby's body parts. And they're still searching a number of possible locations, including landfills and basically any place that this family was known to have visited in the days and weeks before Abby's death. So Alex Kwang, his brother, and their parents all appeared in court on February 28th. They didn't make any pleas, but they were all denied bail. And on Tuesday, March 7th, the seventh person connected to this case was arrested. And as of now, they haven't released much information about her, besides to say she was a 28-year-old influencer, and she was detained at the border between Hong Kong and mainland China. So I did read a couple things about her. Some people said, she goes by a nickname or the name Pun online, and she's a cooking influencer, but I never know, if any of it's real. That's all we know about her so far. She's 28. She appears to be some sort of influencer, and she's been accused of helping one of the people involved in this case, like one of, I believe, the family members who killed Abby. She's been accused of helping them and assisting them. Now, there's a picture of her being arrested, and in this picture, her face is covered, and all you can really see is that she's wearing leather pants, and, she's a smaller woman, and she's being led away, but we don't really know anything about what she did, besides that she allegedly helped an accomplice in the murder and then ran away herself. It looks like she was trying to leave Hong Kong and go to mainland China, and that might be the first time in history that anybody's trying to escape Hong Kong and go to China. Now, police believe, based on his prior law enforcement experience, that Kwang Kao was the mastermind of this murder plot, and he'd also know very well that Hong Kong doesn't have a death penalty. So no matter how horrendous the crime that he committed, the most he would get, or the most his family members would get, would be life in prison. And this particular crime does seem very gruesome to me, right? Obviously, it is gruesome, with the dismemberment and the soup pot. And it's like, why? why did they have to do this? Like, why did you hate her this much that you had to like mutilate her body? But from what I've seen, it seems as if the method of Abby's murder was more out of necessity than out of some sick and twisted pleasure or out of some like hatred or resentment or like some psychopathic tendency to just mutilate a human body. Now, as I said, Hong Kong is a very safe place typically. It has a very low crime rate, especially violent crime. Hong Kong notoriously is known for having support, very high support for the police force. They also have a high incarceration rate, and they do have severe punishments for adult offenders. So they believe that this is some of the reason that kind of keeps the people of Hong Kong from just going out willy-nilly and like killing each other and beating each other. Also, the culture, the religion, their belief in family values, things like that. These are not my words. Like, people are like going to come for me and be like, "Oh, are you saying that family-centered people murder others less?" Well, yeah, first of all, yeah, I think definitely family-centered individuals who like have a loving family and have love in their life murder people less because they're happy and they don't want to murder anybody. But I'm not saying that. These are just like, this is a study that was done. So it's not my words. Don't come for me. But even though they have a low rate of violent crime, it doesn't mean there's no murders happening. And it does seem like there's a pattern in the past 50 years or so that there's been several cases of murder and dismemberment. And this makes you ask, why is dismemberment such a popular method of disposing of a body in Hong Kong? Why are so many murderers in Hong Kong going to dismemberment afterwards? And if Kwong Kao had been a police officer in Hong Kong in 1982, he would have been very familiar with one of these murder dismemberment cases. Serial killing taxi driver, 27-year-old Lam Korwan, gained himself the nickname the Jars Murderer because of the way he stored body parts and the organs of his victims in jars. In a 7-month period, Korwan worked the night shift as a taxi driver, which gave him access to young women who willingly got into his cab because they needed a ride. They didn't think it was unsafe. This murderer, the serial killer, is known to have strangled his victims to death, and his victims were young women between the ages of 17 and 31, and he used an electrical wire in the cab, killing them first and then bringing them back to his apartment. And because he worked the night shift, he'd be coming in, pretty early in the morning, like 3, 4 in the morning, and he lived with his parents. And his brother. He actually shared a room with his brother. So what he would do is he would bring the dead bodies of his victims back to this apartment. He would carry the bodies of these women past his sleeping parents and his sleeping siblings. He would hide the bodies under the family sofa until everyone left for work and school the next day. And then he would pull the bodies out. He would line his room with plastic sheets. What does that remind you of? And then he would perform sexual acts on these corpses of these victims that he murdered. And then he would dismember them. And he did this several times, right? And the way he was caught was actually because apparently this Korwan serial killer guy, he liked to take pictures and video of his crimes. He liked to photograph and video record his crimes and the aftermath of his crimes. And I guess he didn't understand how like photo development worked because he went to a Kodak center to get these photos developed. And I mean, it raised a few red flags, to say the least. Now, is it possible that Kwong Kao was inspired by these crimes and he felt that he had a good chance of getting away with it as long as he didn't snap any photos? Yes, it is possible. And I mean, honestly, this Korwan serial killer guy, he probably would have gotten away with it had he not taken those pictures, if you think about it. So yeah, that was a horrific crime. And in 1999, Hong Kong also saw the terrifying murder of 23-year-old Fan Man Yi. This is truly one of the saddest cases I've ever heard of. This has haunted me. I can't clean my brain of it. And honestly, I don't know if I ever will, but it's incredibly sad because Fan Man Yi had a rough childhood. She had a rough life in general. She was abandoned by her family when she was just a small child, and she was raised in a girls' home By the time she was a teenager, she'd been abused and neglected, and she developed a drug addiction. And then she had turned to sex work to keep her drug supply robust. And at the time of her death, she was working as a hostess in a nightclub, and she stole the wallet of a 34-year-old socialite named Chan Man-luk. This was somebody she was, I guess, like hanging out with. She kind of knew him peripherally, and she decided to steal his wallet. And, there wasn't much money in there. It was like $400, but she stole it. She stole the money, and as a punishment, this dude, Chan Man-luk, he had her abducted. And the two individuals that he had hired to do this, I guess they sort of like initially went rogue, torturing Fan for over a month. But honestly, I'm not giving this Chan Man-luk guy, the socialite dude, I'm not giving him a pass and saying like, oh, he just wanted her abducted and he wanted her money back and he didn't want these guys to do anything bad to her. He didn't want them or expect them to do what they did to her for a month, because he did take part in it, and it was happening at his apartment or like at his house. So he definitely knew about it, and he definitely participated in it, as did somebody else, which I'm going to tell you in a second. It's just horrendous. But basically, this poor girl, Fan, she was tortured for over a month. She was raped. She was beaten. They forced her to eat her own feces. They burned her. The things they did to her night and day for a month were horrendous, unspeakable. And all the while she was kept tied up and, basically like, once again, abused and neglected, as she had been her entire life. And get this, it gets worse. I know it feels like it can't get worse, but one night, a 14-year-old girl who was a friend or a girlfriend of this Chan Man-luk guy, remember, who's like in his 30s? He's got a girlfriend who's 14. Anyways, this 14-year-old girl, she shows up at the house, and she would later tell police that she witnessed her friend or boyfriend, Chan Man-luk, kick Fan Yi in the head 50 times. So this little girl decided to join in as well and like kick this woman who's already been beaten and abused for so long, just keep kicking her and beating her along with the men who were doing it. 14-year-old girl. It just blows my mind. And obviously, one night, Fan succumbed to her injuries, and she died because she was consistently being beaten. She had internal injuries. She had all sorts of things. And I mean, later in court, they would say like, oh no, she overdosed herself. And it's like, well, even if that's true, like, it doesn't take away from the fact that you beat her senseless day in and day out, raped her, burned her, just did horrendous, kicked her in the head 50 times. Like, we're going to act like how she died had nothing to do with that. But when Fan died, her captors moved her into the bathtub and they dismembered her with a saw. And then they cooked individual parts of her body and they boiled her head on the stove. Later, they sewed her boiled head into a giant Hello Kitty mermaid doll. And so this case is known as the Hello Kitty murder. And there's multiple cases of murder and dismemberment throughout Hong Kong's history. And yes, some of it could definitely be like a fantasy cooked up in the depraved minds of psychotic assholes, right? Like, I'm not going to say that there weren't some of these murders and some of these dismemberments done just because the person wanted to. But according to the experts, a lot of the dismemberment that happens after these murders could come simply from living in a city of over 7 million people without many places to hide a body. Retired forensic pathologist Philip Bay said, quote, "Most people live in apartment blocks on top of each other. We don't have individuals with houses or gardens where you can go out and dig a hole and try to bury a body. You're never really alone. Your neighbors are above you, below you, next to you. Anything out of the ordinary will catch someone's attention," end quote. And I mean, in Hong Kong, there's people everywhere, right? And a murderer who lives in a high-rise apartment building, which most people do live in high-rise apartment buildings in Hong Kong, this murderer might have to get into an elevator shared by more than 100 people simply to like get outside of the building. You can't just go strolling around with dead bodies. It's not like the United States or Australia, where a lot of people live in more isolated areas. They have more land. They're out of sight and out of the hearing of their neighbors. In Hong Kong, like, if you decide you're going to kill someone, you got to figure out what you're going to do with the body. And there's not a lot of options. Philip Bay also said that the smell of a decomposing body can draw attention very quickly in the subtropical and humid Hong Kong climate, which is why a lot of murderers have attempted to remove this risk, of a body smelling and drawing attention by cooking or boiling the body parts of their victims. And sometimes they'll just like throw the body parts out with the regular trash, make it kind of look like it's just like leftover food. And most Hong Kong apartments are so small and cramped that residents don't have refrigerators, much less freezers, so they can't like hide the bodies in there or store them for, an extended period of time. Like whatever happens after the murder with the disposal of the body has to happen like quick. You don't have a lot of time. And the average person in Hong Kong doesn't even drive or own a vehicle because, well, first of all, they have a great public transportation system, but buildings with like parking spots, like places to park, they're very rare. And if they do have parking spots at the buildings, the parking spots are so expensive. For instance, in 2019, a parking spot in Hong Kong sold for nearly $1 million, which is crazy to me. So murderers don't even have their own vehicles to store these bodies in and then like drive them to more remote places. And you can't just be loading a body into like a taxi cab or an Uber, like that's going to draw attention again. Philip Bay said, quote, "We live in a place where essentially, if you have killed someone, your next very pressing question is, what do you do with the body? There are very few options," end quote. So that is why it's believed that Abby Choi's ex-husband and his family dismembered her. Like, we definitely believe that they killed her because of a money issue, because of a money disagreement, because of the apartment. Maybe that's what triggered it. And then it kind of started a family feud. But they didn't dismember her because they wanted, to make her feel pain, or because they wanted to like torture her, or because they just got some sick pleasure out of doing it. It just looks like it was out of necessity, which is why you saw portions of her body in the soup pots, because then they could just throw it out like it was food or leftover food or old food and, wouldn't draw too much attention. Although I think like a skull in the pot may have drawn some attention. I don't know. It's crazy to think about that people you at one point in your life hopefully trusted and loved because they were family to you. Those people can turn on you so quickly, even after you've done so much for them. And I mean, maybe it was because she did so much for them that they became entitled and they just kind of expected it. And so when she withdrew, when she pulled her support away, they just couldn't fathom having to survive on their own. And they just couldn't understand why she would do that. And it was like a affront to them. It was like a personal insult to them. And they had to act accordingly. That's just my supposition. I don't know their motives. I don't know why they did what they did. But it's sad altogether, because if you think about it, Abby Choi, she's only 28 years old when she died, and she's got 4 kids. She doesn't look like she had 4 kids. She does not look like she had 4 kids. She had 4 kids, and according to the people who knew her and knew her as a mother, she was an excellent mother. She loved her children very, very, very much, and she will be deeply missed by her children. They now have to grow up without a mother, or 2 of her children have to grow up without a father. So, Abby's current partner, Chris Tam, he said he will take her other 2 children in, the 2 children who are, Alex's children as well. He will take them in and raise them as his own, which is, awesome. That's great. I really feel that is a great thing to do. Keep them with their siblings, keep them together. They've already lost so much, but still, like, even no matter how much you try to put these kids back together, like, they're going to be broken for quite some time. And, there's nothing you can do about that. There's nothing you can do about it. You can't fix them. You can't do anything to fix that. It's going to take time and therapy and love and support and time. But it's all very sad. And I guess the one comforting thing that we can take away from it is, because this is Hong Kong, this family, Alex, Anthony, Kwang Kao, the mom, who I don't think she was a part of the murder. I think she just like helped cover things up and kind of lied to the police and stuff. But at least, because it's Hong Kong, like, they'll face justice. They're not gonna, go to prison for like 2 years and get out or anything like that. It's just, it's obviously going to be something they are going to go away for life. There's plenty of evidence. There's plenty of proof. I think that the police want to find the rest of Abby's body parts so that they can lay her to rest whole and complete. But they don't need that to pin these people to the wall. And I mean, there's no death penalty in Hong Kong, but if there was, I think that they deserve it. It's pretty horrendous. It's very, very sad. So that's all I have on this so far. If there's updates and if more comes out, I will update you. I'll keep you updated and let you know. But until then, let me know what you think about this video. Let me know what you think about this case. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Hit like if you liked it. Share the video if you think it's worth sharing. And also follow me on social media. Instagram and Twitter handles are in the description box. Also, in the description box, you will find a link to Criminal Coffee, my coffee company that I co-own with Derek Levasseur, who's also my partner on the podcast, Crime Weekly. Criminal Coffee is very good. I'm wearing our merch right now. See how cute it is? I told you it was cute. Look at this little coffee bean. Adorable. It's a coffee bean, also a fingerprint. Adorable. So check Criminal Coffee out. Amazing coffee. And check the merch out. Also, don't forget to check Crime Weekly out. All the links to everything I talked about with you today are in the description box. Thank you so much for being here. Stay kind, stay beautiful, and please stay safe. And I'll see you very soon. Bye.
Straight down, and that river runs deep. The mountains get steep, and the voices getting too loud. All these feelings I've buried, it's looking like a cemetery. They're coming back from the grave, calling out my name. Better say a Hail Mary. Well, you don't know how deep it goes until it's getting you slowly. And so you got to let it go. I got blood on the strings.